negatives about that. The positives, I see the positive around respect. So you give people respect and you treat people respect, and it's the respect that also helps us build a nation that looks at things in a way that drives change. But that same behavior also stops people from speaking up, and that's where I was coming from. The ability to speak up when there's wrong. So because we are coming from an authoritarian culture, and I need to respect my elder or somebody in authority, if things are going wrong, that side of our culture is where I see the negative. May not necessarily challenge me, allow me to challenge the status quo. So I think that's where the point, I'm not saying that it's bad, it's in the context within which we apply that. And we spoke about, the piece on the beating. I mean, I think beating comes with it, again, positives and negatives. In beating children, such as excessive beating without explaining why. So you did this wrong, and that is why there's consequences. So I beat you, I spank you, but afterwards I explain why I had to spank you. And then I give you a hug and show that love. So you know the difference between right and wrong. But sometimes the excessive beating has also, I think, has created a generation where we want to move totally away from what our parents did. And then so we swung to the extreme end where we wouldn't discipline our children because our parents discipline us excessively. So whether our children are doing the wrong or right thing, we don't discipline them because discipline in our understanding from the way we were raised was bad. And so discipline, and then when we look at it, we're disciplined and look at where we are. So if they hadn't disciplined, we probably would have been the same place. So we had to find the right balance between discipline and not disciplining. So beating, yes, was good, but beating came with certain consequences that we see now, the way we are parenting children. So, I mean, that's kind of my take.
Fantastic.
I think this comment ties in very well with what you just said, and I'd like to read it. So we have this from Rebecca. One of the challenges is to educate young people with the values, commitments, skills, and courage to take on the status quo, to imagine and take on the mantle of change. Some problems need systematic solutions, which requires people to go beyond I will do the right thing to participating in change at systems level. This requires a willingness to hold others accountable. It's very difficult to do. It starts with young people learning how to and practicing and holding their peers accountable.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you very much.
That's one here.
Thank you. My name is Dr. Grace Nkansa, representing Honors United Universities, and thank you very much to the presenters for this very interesting topic. I think I would like to follow up on two particular points, and I think the person who spoke just before me actually touched on the 2 points. One is that, of course, in Africa, we are never going to not recognizing the role that women also play. And so what are the spaces that women actually have to also demonstrate their own leadership? Because the research is out there that shows that women in leadership positions can actually change some of the issues we're talking around ethical leadership, corruption, whatnot. So we need to recognize this. And I think that, higher ed institutions are really doing what they can to support women in leadership positions. The second thing I think that's really important is that we're talking about ethical leadership from a standpoint of personal agency. But as institutions, we also have a responsibility to think about how we strengthen our accountability systems and our accountability social structures, because it's not just administrative systems, it's also the social structures. So within our education systems, how are we equipping and empowering young people to feel that they can hold their leaders accountable? And we have to be very intentional about this in the way that we prepare them. It's not simply just providing them with lessons of ethical leadership. How is that demonstrated in opportunities for community engagement? And I know that Ashes is doing a really great job of that. but how are you providing them with opportunities for, social and community engagement, both at the community level and also even at the corporate level, because their life is going to, encompass these two aspects. So I would really love to hear, people's thoughts on accountability systems, both from the social structure side of things and also from the kind of administrative compliance sanctions side of things, because this is an area where I think if we don't intentionally teach young people about what they can do, what agency they have within the constraints of whether culture or actual power, we will continue to have this conversation. The change has to come from both ends, from the leadership and also from the grassroots. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I think Prof. earlier talked about his passion for experiential learning. So maybe you can start us off with that, maybe expand it a little bit, then we would get more people to talk about it in response to this one.
Sure. I heard you talking about making the systems accountable, society accountable. So responding at a societal level, rather than only just at the individual level. So admittedly, most of what I spoke about was at the individual level and even at the institutional level, with the idea that these people will then go out there and be role models or leaders in their own rights, leaders of institutions, people who can influence policy and then change society. But yes, there is a role for acting at a societal level from the get-go. And here universities can be involved. So we can influence policies, we can push certain policies that will make the country more ethical and champion that. We can speak out on behalf of those who can't speak out for themselves because they're more likely to be targeted than we are. But so these are different ways of trying to influence society, to have this impact at the society level. I don't know if that shed lights on what you were talking about.
Very much. There is one thing that keeps on coming up, right? So generally, students spend about 4 years, undergraduate, higher education. They spend more years before they get there. Where does it really start in terms of them, all the things that we're talking about, the ethics? We are talking about the responsibility of higher education. Are we putting too much responsibility on higher education? Or, that's where we need to really talk about this thing here. Should we go back to primary? So this is open to all. Maybe you can start us off.
I think it's a continuum. So we start from the home. We have to start from the home as parents or as family. What are the principles and values you're teaching your children, teaching them between good and wrong? And then you take that into the primary school. How's the curriculum built around ethical principles, values, and leadership systems? So how do we imbibe that at the primary level? And then you take it to a secondary school, you're telling the same thing. So your curriculum is also including aspects of that. Then you bring it to university so that right from home, I'm picking up the values of what is good and right. And at home, there are consequences for good and right. So I know if I did good, this is what the result, and if I did bad, this is the result. And I take it same to primary, I take same to secondary, and I take same to university, and I bring same to the corporate world. So if I take from the corporate world, for example, and I take my company, we have the code of conduct, and we had our code of ethics. Every year, we have about 35,000 workforce. Every year, we all go through that training. Virtually, online, about ethics that you sign. Then once that is done, within HR, the systems have been developed such that with the disciplinary committees. So if somebody did wrong and it came to the attention, you go through the disciplinary process, and if there are consequences and it includes termination, you are terminated. Then we, as an organization, we develop what we call our integrity journey. So starting, how do we want to see ourselves as an ethical organization, starting from where we are all the way to the end. And then each year we come back and talk about that. Then we also have this teacher what we call the Ethics Day. So every year there's a day of ethics, and we have panel discussions, and they give out gifts, but panel discussion with people right from junior staff, senior staff, managers, all the way to executives, talking about ethical behavior and what that means. Then the other thing that we do is that we also have champions, ethics champions. So these are people who have been nominated by their own colleagues as people who exhibit ethical behavior, so that if I have ethical challenges, I can go to them and talk to them. The other thing that we use a lot is what we call the integrity helpline. So this is an anonymous helpline where if somebody sees anything, you can call in. I don't know where it sits. You call into a number and then you report, or you can go online and put it in. And then we have a whole team on business integrity and compliance. That's their duty. They investigate it. When it comes out, then they come back to the functional leader with the investigation results and then what actions need to be taken, and they follow it through. So one of the difficult decisions I had to take when I was first appointed vice president was to terminate 3 people. That was the first job I did, to terminate 3 people for unethical behavior. And then those stories are also shared. We will not talk about the individuals, which is something that people are pushing out that tell us who actually is doing that so we can learn. But all those things is helping keep a very tight organization around the way we have to be around ethics. And so with time, it's growing that culture. And when we started, we probably had about 20 reports. Now we have more than 1,000 people reporting in about behaviors that they've seen. And it could be as simple as somebody called me a female and said that sexual harassment. And there are consequences of sexual harassment in human, all the way to termination. And there are consequences for retaliation. If somebody reported and retaliated, then there's also, you have to use discipline or something that terminated. So I think embedding those kind of structures within systems, beyond going to the primary, secondary, even within primary, secondary, universities, how are those systems embedded so that people can report when they see anonymously, when they see this, how you have an ethics champions, how you have an ethical days celebrating that in the, how university students doing training around ethics to help drive that culture and to reinforce it and embed it within the culture of the people.
This reinforces what Rebecca said in terms of systems, but I'll open it up. Do you have systems where you are now that you would like to share? Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm Sylvie from Rwanda, Rwanda Polytechnic, which is the only public institution that offers technical education and vocational training. Thankful for Helpline to have brought us into this network. So what we are doing in Rwanda, what we are trying to do is making sure that the students coming from outside entering in our institution, these values, the ethics, the leadership skills are incorporated in our teaching, because one of the mode of training that we give is a competence-based training. So how do you evaluate a student as being competent? So these aspects of ethics, integrity, attitude at work, because it's hands-on, they work in teams, and we try to emulate what they would do at the workplace. How do they get there? And the challenge mainly is, of course, is making sure that the teaching staff understand these aspects and put them in their teaching activities, or the support staff as well, who are in that environment. So what we are trying to do is to make sure that there is a collective mindset around these issues, so that the students, even though he was not exposed in his prior years to make sure that when he gets into our institution is exposed to these aspects. So that's where the challenge come in, and it reflects on what Rebecca said, how do you build a system that has these values, that culture, so that a student is also gets to these aspects of accountability and so on. On the other side, when in Rwanda, maybe you have heard about it, we have Umuganda, but literally how this is a grassroots cultural value where Umuganda, it's where normally in former years, in a community, you want to help your fellow neighbor to do something. Maybe to cultivate the land, it doesn't have the support, and then other community members come and support him, and then next time they do that. So how do we bring this Umuganda into our students? And when because we trained to get the skills, technical skills, so they do this from what they've learned. So like, let me give an example. If there is a community member who needs a shelter, students collectively come and build the house, because they are maybe studying construction. You have those in electrical engineering, you have those in construction. They come together and they work to solve that problem of that community member. So those skills come into it, the ethical and leadership, because we're doing that work for community, but also a sense of belonging, of being connected to the community, to where they are, to the problems that the society is having. And we want these students to be connected to their community, identify the challenges they're having, and then think of solutions. So these come into their training, but also when they finalize, their studies, work on projects, we find that they try to look in a community problem and try to maybe to produce a product or a solution. Other things are basically around that, and the challenge, as I said, is building that system among the staff community, because when they're exposed to these values, they also get transformed along the way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me adjust the question a little bit, right? So we're talking about ethics, here. Is it that Africans, we are more corrupt than other people from other places? Or is because there are systems in place?
The systems.
Okay, I have systems. Because there are no systems in place. That is why the perception, or maybe because we don't have a whole lot of money, the little that people take becomes a bigger deal. All right, I see.
Thank you very much. And my name is Elaine Matovu from Uganda. And thank you for reframing that question just before I spoke, because you allow me to say exactly what I needed to say. First of all, I think that there is a problem with narratives. And this is where I greatly agree with Adiki when she says, we need to change the narrative. And we must take control of the narrative about how things are going on the continent and so on and so forth. We've in some ways developed a town crier attitude. And that's not to say that there are no problems. I mean, I'm from Uganda. You guys need to be praying for us anytime you have some extra time, because we really have problems. But at the same time, I don't think that there is a place where people are more hopeful than in Uganda. And so what is the difference? What is it that differentiates, now the politically correct thing is to call it the minority world over the majority world. but for long they used to say the developing world versus the undeveloped world. What is the difference? Is it that there is no corruption or whatever? I think I would like to summarize the difference in three things. One is that, by the way, just for context, I also happen to be Dutch resident. So I live between the Netherlands and Uganda. So I make this comparison, very, very contextually. So one is that you find that we have not embraced the idea of a collective conscience as a very, very important thing. Now, some countries have done better than others, and the ones that have, in the areas that they have, as Dr. Ogutu had said, that collective conscience actually becomes a thing. So, for example, in Tanzania, they've been intentional about defining themselves as us Tanzanians, we don't quarrel, we don't what. And the more that you speak into that narrative, it actually becomes a thing. And you begin to see it in the collective conscience and the way that people behave. Rwanda is doing a good job with that as well. And I think the previous speaker sort of spoke into that. So I think one of the things that we have to do is to think about developing our collective consciences and actually branding, nation branding. And this is not a very complicated thing, especially given how today, if you want to start a war, wars are started and lost and won every day on Twitter. So you have Kenyans on Twitter versus Nigerians on Twitter versus Ugandans on Twitter. Of course, Ugandans on Twitter lose a lot of the time, but this is fine. We're working on it. Nigerians on Twitter, Kenyans on Twitter, watch out for us. But that's to digress. So that's point number one. Point number two is, again, the issue of expectations and holding ourselves to high expectations. We talk about standards, but I'm in pre-tertiary education, and one of the things that we've done is to decide to create an environment of high expectation. And we've seen that people actually thrive, children thrive. So we are teaching under 18s. So we've seen that once you hold someone to high expectations, it's not even a discussion. You just know, oh, I know you're going to do great. They will do great. That's what Madame Adiki's dad was doing when he let her sit at home for 6 months. He's like, girl, I gave birth to you. I have high expectations of you. So no, I'm not going to get you a job, and see where she is today. So we do have evidence of it. I think we should clap, really. This is the point at which we clap. Yeah. So that's another thing. Growing a culture of high expectations, number two. Now, the third thing is a little bit touchy, but I have to raise it because we're in Africa. We are immoralizing people many times with no morals. We have to address this issue of the shroud of religion. And I'm surprised no one has talked about it, but it's a huge danger to our society. As long as people cover themselves in the shroud of Christianity, I can only speak about Christianity because I come from a mostly Christian country. I don't know if it's happening in Islamic countries. But people shroud themselves in this blanket of Christianity, and they expect us to accept, one, mediocrity, two, downright bad manners, hypocrisy. In fact, we have added hypocrisy to sin. This is an area where you can count on us to be consistent. And no one wants to talk about it. No one wants to say, my friend, it's not okay for you to throw around Bible verses when we are not seeing the impact of that in your life. My relatives in Kenya, you know what I'm talking about. And these days, your politicians don't even care to quote the correct scriptures. And it's okay. You've not called them out. This is not okay. So I think as we talk about ethical systems, we really have to address the danger of religion, religious beliefs, let me call it, within that system. But here, one of the greatest culprits is Christianity. I fear for the return of Christ, because if he were to return and find what we are doing, he might go back. So as we begin to think about these ethical systems, I think we also need to address the issue of Christianity. That's point number 3. The last one is to start thinking about the elements of emotional intelligence and being very intentional about them. The interesting thing is, you will find again the difference between, as you asked earlier, the two societies, is that if we are strong on there are 4 or 5 elements of emotional intelligence, interestingly, we'll come out with the same results that Christianity is trying to achieve. That's why when you go to the minority nations these days, the churches are empty. But their society has the results of the Christianity that we want. So we need to think about these 5 elements. Number 1, self-awareness, motivation, self-regulation, and which is when you see everything that Madame Adiki has been talking about, it's all about these 5 things. Your social skills, and lastly, empathy. If we treat people the way we want to be treated, we will have a much better society. So thank you very much. Let's think on these things. Those of you that are Christian, and I'm Christian, don't pray against me. But we have to find a way. There must be a way. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I hear there's one question. We'll be able to take one question, and then last, if you could catch us up on those online and give a panelist an opportunity. Please, man.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Eugene again from UCC. I think a gentleman asked a question. I think he was the first person or so. He was sitting, so I didn't see, I saw on the screen. And the answer Madame gave, it was good. She was talking about the principles of the father, amnesty, but the question was about tribalism. And I think this is a golden opportunity for us to address this, because I was talking to my brother here, he says from Nigeria, and said it's the same thing in Nigeria. I'm sure Rwanda, Kenya, Uganda is the same thing. I want to talk about it because we have situations where you need to come from a certain region before you can be vice chancellor of an university in that region. Maybe not only in Ghana, you have to be a bootlicker. Maybe you have to even swallow the boot of an HOD, a dean, or provost before you will be promoted from perhaps senior lecturer to also prof, blah, blah, blah. And it's something that is happening in the academia. But one professor of sociology, he's late, Professor Dominic Kofi Ajiman, said, the more education you get, the more detribalized you become. But unfortunately, in the academia, there is tribalism. And so you will not see meritocracy, but you see nepotism, ethnocentrism. And at times you'll be working with your friends, Ghanaians, maybe Kwaru, Achin, Ashanti, or I'm from the Volta region, and you are with them, and because you don't understand their language, they change the language. And I think ethically it's even wrong because we are all chatting. Why suddenly change the language to a language that I don't understand? So I want us to address this issue. The tribal, your father's principle was wonderful, but people are getting position because of certain tribes. And our sister from Rwanda spoke about the genocide. I don't want to go there, but I learned it was a so-called journalist who said something on radio that let's go and kill these people. I mean, it's a very bad language, and it resulted in all that happening, and it's happening everywhere. So I believe this is a golden opportunity for us to talk about ethnicity, tribalism. Martin Luther spoke about that in America, 39 years, he was killed, but he made an impact. Nelson Mandela did that, was in prison for 27 years, but he came out to be the president. So I want us to address the issue. Sorry, I've digressed, I didn't share my experience, but I think the question on tribalism and ethnicity wasn't addressed properly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you. And you could address it as part of your wrap-up. All right. So if you could.
Certainly. I will start from Mary and take that and the next two questions below that. So Mary Kiguru says, as academics, we can think if how we integrate an ethical leadership responsive pedagogy that allows the student to reflect not only leadership, but what ethical leadership means in their profession. We should think of our institutions as developing the champions of change, guiding our students to become the agents of change. Through curriculum design, each course can integrate activities that allow the students to define their own profile. Key outcome of each course can be being an ethical leader. Thank you very much for that. Now to another comment from Rebecca. The honor code system. So here she's talking about Ashesi University. The honor code system is a way for students to take ownership of the ethical posture of the institution and to develop skills to hold their peers accountable. Thank you for that. In fact, in addition to the honor code system, we also have given voice to values and even Ashesi success. I would let Dean touch on that when he takes over. Then a last comment from Mary says, defining a fully baked graduate. I believe this conversation is feeding into the ingredients of a fully baked graduate. Skills in their preferred profession, knowledgeable, critical thinker, ethical leader, problem solver, change agent. I think it's a little bit more below. All right, we will continue. You can read it when it comes up. I will pass it on to you.
All right. Thank you very much. I've been told that I'm the one standing between you and lunch. And the way things are going, we can do this for another 24 hours because this room, you should all clap for yourself. Very engaged from morning till now, and we are still going. But I'd like to give the last words to our panelists here to wrap us up.
So I think I'll tie it into the comment that the gentleman from my alma mater spoke about, University of Cape Coast. I think that we didn't speak a lot about that, but it's the accountability or accountable systems that we have in place and then the standards. So what is the hiring procedures that we have? We have clearly defined capabilities and skills that we look for when we're hiring. So I think that the way we hire will determine it's a great influencer of the way the culture of an organization will be. And so we're talking about, the nepotism and all that, but I believe that if your hiring system has your clear criteria on who you're hiring, it's not looking at where you're from. It's looking at your capability from a leadership and from a technical point of view. And so my thinking is that if you're following that process, that should be able to set you on the right path. The other thing that we need to think about is what kind of accountability systems do we have? I spoke about the code of conduct, the code of ethics, but it's our processes, the rules that we govern, the standards that govern the organization, or the institution, the investing institutions are critical. So the standards will be, if we're training students, how are we going to do that? What is it that we're looking for? What kind of leader, what kind of student do we want to graduate? And what do we want to be known for? And I think setting all those things up will help us build the character of the students that we're looking for. And that kind of student that we build, are the students that will come out into the nation to lead a continent and a country that is ethically driven and that rules and develops itself through good leadership. So kind of that's the way I'd like to sum it up. It's the ethical leadership, it's the systems that we have in place, and it's defining where we want to be and making sure that we're leading and governing and teaching our students according to that.
Okay. I hear there's a student who has a comment. Yeah, please go on.
Hello, my name is Beatrice Kabu from Ashesi University, and I'm really inspired by the stories and the discussions, and particularly your story, right? But what happens to from personal experience, I have friends who keep saying their parents have already set the opportunities, they have their positions already, right? And I have quite a number of friends who are like that. So what happens to me with no connections, but my friends who have these connections already, right? And say, I can't afford to go 2 months without a job. My family depends on me, right? Am I to watch my friends keep climbing up the ladder while I hold on to my ethics, jobless, with nothing to do?
You know, I allowed the student question because I was thinking that we haven't had that opportunity. But it's a very, very important question, which needs to be answered. So if we could give maybe minutes to answer that, we go for lunch.
So I think I'm an example of what you're talking about. Connections were available, but connections were not used. And so I started life sitting in the front of the trotro, like the public transport, I did the front seat. Because I had to go to work, and I didn't have a great job, I didn't have a car, but it's the values that you've been taught in Ashasi. The things that you've learned in Ashasi is what is going to determine what you become in the future. It's not the connections, because the connections can get you there. After the connections, now you get into the organization. It's a performance that is going to take you. It's not the connection. So connection can get you only this far. The rest is who you believe in, who you are, and the way you perform is what you take. So hold on to your ethical values. Don't give it up. It will pay off in future. For now, it doesn't look like it's paying off. And you look back 5 years, 10 years down the line and see your mates and say that, well, they got the connections and started off. I didn't get the connections, I got in the right way. But because of my ethics and the leadership capability I have, this is where I am. So don't give up. Okay?
An excellent response today, but let's all think of where we started from. 2050, we are doubling. We are bursting at the seams as we say here. Even if we are able to double everything, the universities, hospitals, it wouldn't be enough. So just think about it and then make sure that every action that you take from here, there is a level of urgency in it, because all of us need to be having this conversation. Thank you, and I'll give it back to Sabine.
Thank you very much, Dean Abdul. Thank you, Madam Adiki, for such an interactive and insightful session. And thank you to all of you for participating actively and sharing your views. I would like to just mention one thing that keeps ringing my head from Dr. Vincent, that each and every one of us are leaders. Each and every one of us must choose what our values are, including our institutions. And that is what the people will be looking at us as we move forward. Looking at what we do and what we say. Keep that at the back of your minds. And by the time you leave here, it'll be great to outline or put down what it is you are taking back. Thank you all very much. I would like to call on Prof. Angela to give her closing remarks.
Short story about the power of one. I was picked out to go and present at a session, and thank you so much. And as we were driving, the time showed that I was going to be late. We were caught in traffic. So the company had sent the driver to pick me up. While we were in traffic, he gets a call from someone in their office saying, put your blinkers on and just kind of weave through and get her here. So I say, you can't do that, almost like what you said.
He said, why? I said, my topic is ethical behavior. The person on the phone says, Madam, change your topic. So the driver looks at me and he says, here is the part about the power of one. We have a new IGP who is known for making sure that no matter who you are, you could be a minister, if you fault the law, he takes you in, to the police station, whatever. So he looks at me long and hard, the driver, and he says, and the IGP is called Dampare. He says, Dampare might be watching. So for that reason, I will not turn the blinkers. So it wasn't my ethical behavior topic, nor anything else. But the fact that this gentleman might see him. Right now, he was supposed to be here, right? He has been called on an emergency to the north. That's where he is now. Just imagine that day, the man might have been in the north. But in Accra, he was willing to behave just in case Dampare was watching. So I think it all begins with us, with each one of us. If one person can affect the behavior of a driver without being around, but because of his reputation, I think all that we're saying is good. We throw it to the wind, it will get there. But I think it all begins with us. So thank you again and have a nice lunch.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Angela. We have lunch outside. The volunteers will direct us. Enjoy your afternoon, and thank you all so much for coming to today's events. See you. Good afternoon.
Good job.
Thank you.